Yeah. What's good? It's Woog. We are going to talk some boxing today. We're going to do a little recapping, a little previewing. We're going to do some estimating, some, pontificating. We're going to do all of that. And there is a lot to discuss in the world of boxing. I hope everybody's having a good week. I hope everybody's beating the heat. It's a pretty tough one, depending on what region you're in. I am in Long Beach, California, and so I'm pretty close to the water. So, I feel like I'm kind of spared maybe 10 degrees, when I just look at different regions and how hot it is. I can't be too mad. You know what I mean? Now, obviously, some days it's going to reach, pretty hot, but it's not going to reach like super inland desert-like hot. But, yeah, I hope everybody's having an enjoyable week. And again, I hope everybody's beating the heat. But let's get right to it. There's a lot to discuss. We're coming off a pretty exciting fight weekend, right? I almost don't know which one to start with. So, I'll let you guys decide on that. Otherwise, I'll probably go with Navarrete Valdez before I jump into AJ's performance over or his knockout win over Robert Helenius. And then the idea, if you believe Eddie Hearn, if you listen to some of the commentary from Shelly Finkel, Deontay Wilder's longtime manager, it sounds like Joshua versus Wilder is up next. So we're going to talk a bit about that. Again, we're going to cover AJ's performance. I'm just going to do a quick run through to let you know what we will be discussing in the hour. Canelo Alvarez and Canelo-Charlo just had their press conference in New York City earlier today. We're going to talk a little bit about Canelo versus Charlo. There were a couple of fights that were announced. One of them is Bam Rodriguez versus Sonny Edwards. That's a pretty exciting one. And there was also Jesus Ramos versus Erickson Lubin that was announced. I'm going to just type in Bam versus Sonny just so I have it as a note to look at in a second. But yeah, Bam Rodriguez versus Sonny Edwards was announced. That's going to be on DAZN. They're also floating out the idea of David Benavidez versus Demetrius Andrade. Oh boy, I hope that one happens. I really hope that happens. But tough sledding for Andrade if that's his second draw at not draw as in, the fight resulted in a draw, but your second opponent selection at 168. That's going to be a tough one. You're fighting this young beast, David Benavidez, who's still, in his 20s, and he ain't in his late 20s. And Demetrius Andrade is in his mid 30s. And again, he's coming up, basically. He's had one fight against Damon Nicholson at 168. But I hope they make that fight just because I love seeing the best fight the best. Upheaval 963, what's going on? Thank you for coming through. Sub Swoles is in the house as well. Yes. Yeah. And Sub Swoles and I, we haven't even talked about the last fight weekend, but we should have probably caught up on the side. I just wanted to get your thoughts on some of the action. There was also some UFC action, and it was one of the lesser cards there. But yeah, we're also going to cover a fight that took place on the Anthony Joshua versus Robert Helenius undercard. We're not going to talk too much Derek Chisora versus Gerald Washington. I said heading into the fight, I just hope, I kind of hope that both guys retire at this point. They've had super long careers. They've both taken their share of beatings, absolute beatings. So I don't really feel inspired to get into that one. The one I do want to talk a bit about is Filip Hrgović and his fight, against Dempsey McKean. It didn't inspire a lot of confidence in Filip Hrgović, and I'm going to talk some Filip Hrgović. Like, something about his body language just doesn't sit well with me. It's not the look of a winner when he's walking back to the corner. I felt the same way when he was fighting Zhang Zheli or Zheli Zhang. I didn't think that his body language exuded a lot of confidence, and his fight style, minus his early knockout wins, something about Filip Hrgovic's demeanor in the ring has me thinking that he might be he is obviously a very talented fighter, and he's like 6'6", 6'7", big dude. He's an Olympian. He was a medalist, right? The same year that Joe Joyce won the silver and Tony Yoka won the gold. I believe Philip Ergovich was the bronze winner that year. But yeah, I'm going to talk a little Philip Ergovich and just the prospects of him moving forward in this heavyweight division, as he's now going to be, you know, he's about to be a top contender for one of the belts. And Jay Foreman is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Yes, Jay Foreman. We're also going to talk a little Gary Antoine Russell. Now, not to be confused with his very super fast, talented brother, older brother, Gary Russell Jr. You know, there's Gary Antonio Russell, who recently got knocked out by Emmanuel Rodriguez. And then there's Gary Antoine Russell, who he's a very different fighter than his older brother, Gary Russell Jr. Not nearly the same hand speed, but he's looking pretty damn sturdy and strong. Hard hitter. I mean, he stopped Victor Postal. So he's a couple divisions up from where Gary Russell Jr. was, right? Gary Russell Jr. was a featherweight, 126. Gary Antoine is campaigning at 140. And again, he's much more of a power puncher than his very fast brother is. And by the way, quick note on Gary Russell Jr. I have my doubts on whether he will ever return to the ring. He's now entering his mid-30s, and he was a very one fight a year type of fighter for several years, basically during his whole WBC champion reign. He was just fighting one time a year, and now he's, you know, been battling the shoulder injury and stuff. And I mean, it sounds like he'd been battling that for some time, but I heard him float out the idea that he wanted to come back to fight Naoya Inoue, probably at a catch weight. I don't know what you guys think about that fight right now. Naoya Inoue just demolished, just completely dominated Stephen Fulton, right? Do you guys want to see Naoya Inoue Gary Russell Jr. return to fight Naoya Inoue? Should that be the next step? I mean, I'm almost already expecting the monster to become undisputed at 122, you know, by fighting Marlon Tabales, right? But yeah, Gary Russell Jr., he's the type who, you know, even a few years ago, he would always float out the idea, oh, I want to take on Tank Davis. I want to fight Devin Haney. But then, you know, he would never get in any of these fights that we ever wanted to see him in. He had one of the more frustrating title reigns I could think of in recent memory. But yeah, now he's floating out the idea of fighting Naoya the Monster Inoue. But yeah, we're also going to talk a little bit Shakur Stevenson. I'm wondering, is Shakur Stevenson a little bit stuck in his campaign at 135 right now? Like, with Devin Haney going up and maybe fighting Regis Prograis, if they could work out the business there, Shakur Stevenson is kind of the odd man out. Now, you could tell Top Rank wants Shakur Stevenson versus Vasily Lomachenko. It's just a matter of, one, are they able to make that fight? Does Vasily Lomachenko want to make that fight? And is it going to be for a vacant belt at 135? So we're going to talk a little Shakur Stevenson as well, because I think he's kind of in a pickle right now. It doesn't seem like any of the guys that he wants to fight really want to fight him. And the guy who is calling him out is saying, hey, I'll fight you, is Joseph Jojo Diaz, who I never liked at 135. He's a 126 guy who stopped being able to make weight, so went to 130, stopped being able to make weight there, and so then he went to 135. But that was never his best operational weight. So, but that is who is calling out Shakur Stevenson. I wish Shakur Stevenson, you know, could get a fight with like William Zepeda or Isaac Cruz, somebody like that. Not Jojo Diaz, you know what I mean? But yeah, they also announced Richardson Hitchens versus not William Zepeda, but Jose Zepeda, the former, basically the guy who fought very evenly with Jose Ramirez a few years ago, the guy who knocked Ivan Barišić out cold in one of the fights of the year, if not the fight of the year in 2020. That was the one where they were exchanging like 6 knockdowns in the first few rounds. But yeah, Richardson Hitchens, he's a Matchroom prospect. It sounds like he's going to be fighting Jose Zepeda, who Regis Prograis recently beat late last year to capture that WBC 140-pound title. I kind of like that fight. That's a good step-up fight for Richardson Hitchens. Upheaval 963 said, Inoue will retire Mr. Gary Russell Jr. if he isn't retired already. Yeah, Gary Russell Jr. has already alluded to being retired, and it just sounds like Look, I have long wondered whether he had a passion to fight or if this was all business for Mr. Gary Russell Jr. But yeah, I agree. At this stage, especially if he's not totally healthy, I expect Naoya Inoue to kind of have his way with him. But, you know, Gary Russell Jr. is one of the very few people who at his best has faster hands than Naoya Inoue. So if we were dealing with a prime Gary Russell Jr., that would be an excellent fight. That would be a remarkable fight because, you know, in the age that the biggest fights in the division were like Leo Santa Cruz versus Carl Frampton, I always thought that Gary Russell Jr., if he were to fight Carl Frampton, would have beaten Carl Frampton. And if he were to have fought Leo Santa Cruz, my estimation was that Gary Russell Jr. would beat Leo Santa Cruz. I mean, these aren't facts. These are just my observational opinions, you know? But I've had a lot of respect for his abilities, right? We saw that when he fought a young, undefeated Jojo Diaz. But he wasn't able to get the fight with Josh Warrington when Josh Warrington was beating Lee Selby and Carl Frampton, right? They never made that fight. I would have loved to have seen Gary Russell Jr. fight Lee Selby, Carl Frampton, Leo Santa Cruz, Josh Warrington a little bit later. Didn't get any of those fights. Ray Vargas, I mean, whoever. He ended up fighting his mandatory year after year, resulting in a very disappointing back half of his career. But yeah, that's what Gary Russell Jr. is floating out. Him versus Naoya Inoue. I don't think that there's a lot of meat and potatoes to that fight actually happening. You know, Naoya Inoue is fighting the fights that matter. I'm gonna leave it to you guys on whether I give you my Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz takeaways, but we'll circle back to that one. Diego Pacheco versus Marcelo Caceres was also a fight that was recently made. Diego Pacheco, a very good 168-pound prospect coming up right now, and Marcelo Caceres is the guy who knocked Edgar Berlanga down when Edgar Berlanga started going the distance and stopped knocking people out in the first round. Diego Pacheco is going to be fighting that guy. I think it's an appropriate step up. I think that talent-wise, Diego Pacheco is looking like one of the better fighters at 168. Like, look, I know David Morrell Jr. is a little bit more proven in that he beat Falcao coming up in weight to fight him, but I kind of put Diego Pacheco in a similar category. Tell me if I'm premature on this one, but I put Diego Pacheco in a similar category to David Morrell Jr. I know that they bestowed a lesser belt on David Morrell Jr. already. I get that, but that lesser belt doesn't mean much to me. They could have anybody who they want to fight for one of those vacant titles, fight for one of those vacant titles. So yeah, Diego Pacheco, I'm looking at him as being a very serious prospect. And then Bam Rodriguez versus Sonny Edwards was announced. I mean, damn, that's a very good matchroom fight. I would have to favor Bam Rodriguez. If Sonny Edwards pulls this off and beats Bam, that's a little star in the making right there. If you beat Bam Rodriguez, because I expect, I haven't checked the betting odds, I expect Bam Rodriguez to be the favorite in that one. But Sonny Edwards is a sweet scientist. He's kind of a back foot heavy, slick fighter. That's going to be a very good technical matchup. And I really wonder how that one's going to go down. Again, I'm expecting Bam Rodriguez to pull it off, but I'm going to further analyze that one. And let me know what you guys think about that matchup. Benny Bronx is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Yeah, look, Jay Foreman, I agree. I can't help but feel for Gary Russell Jr. or feel that he had way more potential to be in big fights. Yeah, he took the route of let me pick up my check because you make more money as a champion, but he would have he would take no other fights during the year other than his mandatory contender. So sometimes it resulted in an interesting matchup like a King Tug Niambiar. It's like, okay, that's an interesting fight, but it wouldn't have been one of the top 5 to 8 guys that you want to see him fight. You know, I've long felt the same way about Jamal Charlo at 160. Okay, you know, you're fighting so-and-so, but it's not one of the 5 guys that I want to see you fight in that division. Same thing with, there are a lot of fighters who kind of have that, who take, for, you know, whether it's their fault or not, have that trajectory. Demetrius Andrade, another example. But yeah, Gary Russell Jr. fell victim or somewhat played a role in that being his that being his reality, right? During his 126-pound title reign, all the way up to his loss against Mark Magsayo. Let's see. Yeah, I agree. Upheaval 963. Pacheco does have a good upside. And Jay Foreman. Yeah, he's, that fight against Johnny Gonzalez, that might have been the most impressive win for Gary Russell Jr. I mean, look, you remember him coming up, right? He was flashing some of the fastest hands in all of boxing. And it was around the same time Adrian Broner was coming up. Didn't have quite as fast hands, but at the time he was looking very good and he was just one of the most, sought after and most watched prospects. Like, this is the guy that you need to see. Back in the day when he was like, hey, comb my hair, dad, after his wins, right? Adrian Broner was looking very promising at that time. But when Gary Russell Jr. had the title opportunity against Johnny Gonzalez, who was coming off an impressive knockout win over Abner Mares. That that wasn't the second time they fought, was it? No, they only fought once, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that was a high stakes fight. When Abner Mares fought Johnny Gonzalez knocked Abner Mares out early in that fight. Gary Russell Jr. came in to that fight against Johnny Gonzalez and looked like he made Johnny Gonzalez look like he was fighting underwater. The way that he was throwing his punches and the way his punches looked compared to Gary Russell Jr., who had not only super fast hands, but feet that were fast enough to jump into the pocket and let his combinations go and jump out without any harm. And the way that he was stepping in, it looked like Gary Russell saw an opponent that was moving in slow motion and was able to just dial up whatever move he wanted to make and was able to execute perfectly on that move. Again, that might be Gary Russell Jr.'s best career win. Super impressive. Go check out Gary Russell Jr. versus Johnny Gonzalez after this live chat, of course, if you haven't seen that fight. Super good performance. Good call out, Jay Foreman. Yeah, so we're going to get into all those different things that I mentioned, but let's start at the top with Emmanuel Navarrete's scintillating win over Oscar Valdez. Like, I picked Oscar Valdez to win that one via late knockout. I did not know that Navarrete's chin would hold up as well as it did. Navarrete, I mean, we've talked Navarrete in here a few times. He's such a freak of nature, physical outlier where, most humans aren't built to have that sort of a workload in 36 minutes. People just can't do it. If most fighters fought the first 3 rounds the way that Navarrete fought those first 3 rounds, they would have been spent and ready to be stopped by like the 5th round. Seriously, this guy responded to a broken hand that, he mentioned it earlier in the fight. And I heard him say manos. And looking down at his hand, he was saying something about manos. And so they were mentioning it. And that's when Bernard Osuna from the ESPN broadcast said that his corner, his cousin, told him that, he jokingly said that Emmanuel Navarrete hurt his hand by hitting Oscar Valdez so hard, so repeatedly, right? So that was earlier in the fight. We're talking like 7th round, 6th round, something like that. In the 9th round, it looked like Oscar Valdez was coming on strong. In the 7th and 8th rounds, he had some of his best work in the 8th round or 7th or 8th round. And then in the 9th round, Oscar Valdez had his best round in the whole fight where you could observably see that Navarrete wasn't comfortable throwing his right hand anymore. Like, the secret was out, right? It was very clear that he had an injured right hand. So what does he do? He goes back to his corner. He's listening to the instructions that he's given, and he comes out for the 10th round. And by the way, he said in his corner, he repeated, but my hands hurt. And that was his response to the instructions that he was being given. So he comes out for the 10th round and throws 128 punches in the 10th round. And they weren't all with the left hand. So he was basically peppering in the right hand, not throwing it with full force, but he was doing it enough to blind Oscar Valdez, because Valdez's eye was pretty shut for the left hand at that time. So he could deploy the left hand. Oscar Valdez can't really see it, but he was still mixing in a lot of work with his injured hand and landing with it. It was one of the most remarkable things I've seen recently. 128 punches after your worst round, and after you are clearly bothered by the injury to your right hand. Like, I've got so much respect for Emmanuel Navarrete. And not only that, he swept the 10th through the 12th round. And it's not like Oscar Valdez wasn't fighting hard and wasn't executing on what he was, what he was trying to do. He hit Navarrete several times with loaded up left hands. I mean, he would wing that left hand was whistling from Oscar Valdez, and he was connecting with it. But again, I didn't expect Navarrete to be able to take those punches. Navarrete just a few years ago was earning a 122-pound title in those back-to-back fights against Isaac Dogbe, right? Went up to 126, fought, Christopher Diaz, Ruben Villa, Joet Gonzalez, was looking very good. And then he had a problematic fight against Eduardo Baez, got kind of shaken up and was losing those early rounds against Baez. And then he stops Baez to the body. Then he goes up to 130, gets dropped in his debut there against Liam Wilson. I thought he was about to get stopped against Liam Wilson. And I felt that it was always a matter of time with Navarrete. The same way that I felt that it was a matter of time with Adam Kownacki when he was working up the ranks and he was about to be Deontay Wilder's next opponent, right? When Deontay Wilder was WBC champion, I felt that Kownacki's fight style wasn't going to age well because he was always there to get hit. He was throwing a ton of volume, but I'm like, once you're going in there against somebody who could actually blast you, you're in trouble, right? So I didn't think it was going to happen in the Robert Helenius fight, but it did happen in the Robert Helenius fight, and Adam Kownacki was never the same. I kind of felt that that's what we were running into with Navarrete in that fight against Liam Wilson. But he ended up battling back, throwing those 6 to 8 punch combinations, after getting blasted, knocked down badly, hurt again. He got hurt repeatedly in that fight, but he just threw so many punches, overwhelmed, and beat the hell out of Liam Wilson, ended up stopping him. So heading into this fight against Valdez, I'm like, okay, the jig is up, right? Like, Navarrete is going to finally meet his match. And not only was he able to take Valdez's very hard left, it wasn't just the left hooks. Valdez was hitting him with the right hand, and he had a really nice jab. And Navarrete walked into the jab a couple of times. And that's another thing about Navarrete. Because he's lunging in, it's not like the guy has to throw a hard punch to knock you down, especially the way that Navarrete's feet work. You would think that he's off balance enough to where when he keeps on lunging in, just catch him cleanly, you're bound to drop the guy, especially if you hit as hard as Oscar Valdez. But one, Navarrete has a very underrated jab. He was pummeling Oscar Valdez with that jab in the first couple of rounds, right? Absolutely pummeling him. But if you look at Navarrete's face after the fight, he didn't have a mark on him. He looked like he was ready for a photo shoot at the end of the fight against Valdez. How do you even explain that? Like, we saw some of the punches he was taking against Oscar Valdez. I mean, we heard the commentary too, right? Oh, a hard left hook from Valdez. There were several of those moments. It was only a fraction of those moments compared to how many times Navarrete was hitting Oscar Valdez. Navarrete threw well over 1,000 punches in that fight. But how do you emerge from that fight without a mark on your face? And I'm not sugarcoating. I'm not being euphemistic here or exaggerating. He literally didn't have any wear on his face. He looked like he just got out of bed, and he looked like he was ready to go out to the club after that fight of the year contender. It's absolutely crazy. I want to get to some of what you guys are saying. Benny Bronx said Andre versus Benavidez in the works. Yeah. I don't like that for Benavidez. I mean, I'm sorry, for Andre. I have to keep it real with you. Demetrius Andre, if you look at even his fights against like Liam Williams, or against Damon Nicholson in his 168-pound fight, Yes, he was winning those rounds, but you got the impression that he was having to work really, really hard, right? It didn't look like easy rounds, and it didn't look like he was able to just hit and not get hit that cleanly. It was kind of an ugly performance against Damon Nicholson. Well, I mean, against David Benavidez, Andrade might win the first few rounds like Caleb Plant did, but I just don't know what those middle rounds are going to look like, especially if he's not able to slow down the activity of David Benavidez. You know, David Benavidez, like Emmanuel Navarrete, is one of those fighters where if you can't get his respect in a way where he throws far fewer punches, or if you can't just knock him clean out, good luck trying to win rounds against this guy. Good luck trying to win enough rounds over the course of 12 rounds to win a fight against this guy. You know, I thought that Oscar Valdez was going to get Navarrete's respect, where Navarrete gets hit by a couple of those hooks and says, oh, okay, let's try picking the lock instead. Let's not just run the red lights and keep our foot on the gas. Let's be a little bit more methodical about how we enter here. But Navarrete will throw these 4-punch combinations where he'll start it off with a lead hand uppercut, right? A left hand uppercut, throw a right hand on top of that, and now his feet are totally in a different position. Then throw a straight left after that, then throw a looping right hand after that, and then come with a sweeping left hand after that. No trainer will teach you to throw punches like this. That leaves you so vulnerable, but it works for Navarrete, and I really can't explain it. Again, he is a physical anomaly, freak of nature. But yeah, with Andrade versus Benavidez, that might be very tough sledding for Demetrius Andrade. But honestly, I'm just glad that Andrade is finally, if they in fact make this fight, having a fight that matters. It's just sad when you see somebody as talented as that, like Gary Russell Jr., fighting in a bunch of fights that nobody gives a damn about, right? Demetrius Andrade held down a belt at 154, held down a belt at 160, fought his mandatories, but it was nothing interesting. Can you think of the last fight from Gary Russell Jr. or Demetrius Andrade where when the fight was announced, not when it was taking place and happening, but when it was first announced, you were like, oh, hell yeah. I mean, the answer for Gary Russell Jr. is Johnny Gonzalez, maybe Joseph Jojo Diaz when he was young and undefeated down at featherweight. Demetrius Andrade, I can't even think of a time. Maybe against Vanes Martirosyan, kinda. It's a frustrating career reality. I mean, he got paid pretty well, but in terms of having a legacy that people care about, not so much. Let's see. Upheaval 963 said Navarrete just walked through Valdez's biggest shots. That dude is crazy, throwing 128 with a hurt hand. I mean, there were several other rounds before that where he threw 100 plus punches. Fernando Ontiveros, thank you for Ontiveros, sorry. Thank you for coming through, my man. Yeah, thank you. Welcome. I like Navarrete's awkward style. Yeah, I was saying this around the time. Well, I thought this around the time. I wasn't doing videos when he was fighting Isaac Dogboe, but around the time just after he fought Joet Gonzalez. So it would be around the time of Navarrete versus Joet Gonzalez. I thought that Navarrete was one of the must-see fighters in the sport. Like one of the guys who is so entertaining, so unusual that if I was to recommend a non-boxing fan or a casual boxing fan, like, hey, check this guy out if you want to be entertained, Navarrete is near the top of that list. Like, there's no way that you could watch a Navarrete fight and not come away with, damn, that guy's a handful. He seems like an absolute nightmare to fight. Could you imagine this? And again, it would be one thing if he was a little bit chinny. And I thought maybe he's a little bit chinny after seeing his fight against Liam Wilson, or at least more chinny in this division, because not all fighters, when they move up divisionally, are able to, one, pack the same punch that they could in the lower division, and two, absorb the punches at the higher division. Navarrete looked a lot better at absorbing punches in this fight against Oscar Valdez than he did against Liam Wilson, and I don't know what that means for the rest of the 130-pound division. I would love to see Navarrete fight against Joe Cordina, who really put a beating on Shavkat Rakhimov, another fighter that I looked at as being pretty damn tough. And watching what Cordina did against Rakhimov had me adjust my ceiling for Joe Cordina. Like, heading into his fight against Ogawa before scoring that unexpected knockout, I was like, Joe Cordina, he's a nice stylist, probably doesn't hit that damn hard, but then you see him put Ogawa flat on his back and out. It's like, damn, okay, maybe I had him wrong. And then you see him perform the way that he did against Shavkat Rakhimov. Yeah, I've done some Joe Cordina ceiling adjusting in recent months. But I would like to see Navarrete against Joe Cordina. I don't think it's going to happen because you got one guy, Navarrete, on Top Rank, and then you've got Joe Cordina on Matchroom. And that's one of the frustrating things about all divisions, right? A lot of the fights that we would want to see, if it doesn't involve superstars where the business is worth jumping and making these multi-promotional events, you usually don't see these fights that we want to see if the guys aren't just blockbuster draws. So I don't think we're going to see a unification fight between Navarrete and Joe Cordina. Are we going to see one with Navarrete and Hector Garcia? Garcia holds the WBA belt, right? He's the PBC fighter who recently lost via stoppage to Gervonta Davis. That was Gervonta Davis's warm-up before fighting Ryan Garcia. I don't think we're going to get that because we've got, Emmanuel Navarrete against, we got Navarrete on Top Rank and Hector Garcia on PBC. So I don't think that that's going to happen. I'm sorry, I've got family calling me on the phone. Hey, my other family that's in the chat room, please tell that family that I'm on a live chat and that I love them and I'll talk with them ASAP. Yeah, so I don't think we're going to get that cross-promotional matchup either. Let's see. I want to get to some of what you guys are saying, but yeah, a lot of the fights that I would want to see Navarrete in, and by the way, I was mad that he left 126. I really wanted to see him fight either Robesi Ramirez. I wanted to see him fight, who else was on 126 at the time who was looking very, imagine Navarrete versus Mauricio Lara. Like, I know that would be cross-promotional as well, but imagine that fight just stylistically. Or Navarrete versus Lee Wood. Lee Wood is as game as they come. I would have loved to have seen that fight, but now that he's up at 130, we can't get that. And I was just in my mind thinking of how Navarrete against a lot of these other guys, even Ray Vargas, might play out. Let's see. Jay Foreman said his defense could use some improvement, but Navarrete's stamina seems to be off the charts. Yes, totally unusual stamina. I remember even in the later rounds, he didn't seem to be breathing hard. He also has quite the poker face. Yeah, when he gets hurt, you wouldn't know it. Even when he got knocked down against Liam Wilson, he got up and looked, you know how a lot of fighters smile awkwardly? He didn't even give you too much of that. It's just, I don't know, like there is this, I knew when he fought Isaac Dogboe that he was unusual. I didn't know if he was special. But I'm starting to think that this might be one of those special guys. Like, look, I remember before Manny Pacquiao, and I'm not comparing Navarrete to Pacquiao, but when Pacquiao earned his first title, we knew he was unusual. We didn't really know until he beat Marco Antonio Barrera and until he won the rematch against Eric Morales that Pacquiao was special. We didn't know, and obviously later on when he beat Oscar De La Hoya, I would have never have thought that. But it took some time for us to understand that this is not only an unusual fighter, but truly a special fighter. I don't know that that's what we're dealing with Navarrete, but it's not out of the question. The way that he handled this fight against Oscar Valdez, it kind of blew my mind because he was able to do all of those Navarrete-like things against a guy who I didn't think that those Navarrete-like things would work against. But yeah, poker face, didn't look like he was breathing hard. And even just the swag, he'll rock the cowboy hat, vaquero. Like he just seems like the type, like you could see him in like one of those small like dive bars around like the billiards or pool table, with his thumbs in his jeans loops, you know what I mean? Just kind of like kicking back. He kind of has that demeanor about him. And I think that he knows what he's doing marketing wise. Like you hear him in interviews. He's kind of a witty cat. Like, I wonder what his star potential is. You know what I mean? If he could get one or two more big fights and one or two more performances like he just had right here. Again, not again, but it's a lot tougher to market the really, really, really small guys in stature. But some guys just kind of jump off the page, and he looks like he might be one of them. Like, again, it's just unbelievable fight style, and the fact that he was able to pull that stuff off against Oscar Valdez. Valdez looked like he didn't know what this Valdez looked confused. Like, what am I dealing with right now? Like, is this guy for real? Like, that's the vibe and the impression that I got from Valdez. Let's see. Son of Apollo, thank you for coming through, my man. Yeah, thank you. Valdez was throwing all looping Hail Mary hooks. He's very one-dimensional. Okay, so Valdez, he looked like he was calculated, and he looked like what he was trying to do was walk Navarrete into traps. The only thing is, Navarrete didn't seem to care when he would fall into a trap. He would just keep on coming and keep on throwing punches like it was no problem. So now Valdez had a game plan. It just didn't seem to matter to Navarrete. Navarrete has this like zombie-like quality where he's undeterred by whatever your game plan is, because he's going to do what he's planning on doing anyway. And if you want to see like just what that nightmare looks like in real time, if the guy's not expecting it, go rewatch those two fights. The one where Isaac Dogboe comes into the fight as the champion and Navarrete takes the belt, and then the rematch where he actually stops Dogboe. The first one went the distance. He stopped Dogboe in the 12th round in the rematch. Go rewatch those. It just looked like you did not envy Isaac Dogboe, and you could hear the commentary exceedingly and gradually understanding that this is not a regular cat we're dealing with in Navarrete. And when you get to like witness that the evolution in the commentary, if you will, it's just one of those things that you're just very impressed by. And it's exciting because you think that you're on the brink of like witnessing like the next new thing. And here we are like a few years later with Navarrete dominating. Yes, it was a fight of the year contender. Yes, it was a competitive fight in a lot of moments, but you could also classify that as a relatively dominant performance from Navarrete, mostly because Oscar Valdez couldn't do anything to stop the avalanche from rounds 1 through 12, and his face told the story. Let's see. David Eister is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Here's that one topic, and then I'll get back to boxing. How about a group called the Comrades? You could take the boy out the hood, but West Coast gangster rap. Yeah, the Comrades. They played that on the radio a lot. You could take the boy out the hood, but you can't take the hood out the home, boy. Now it's on, boy. That they led into a verse with that part. But yeah, I remember the Comrades. Yeah, good call out. Heck yeah. You know what? With Navarrete against other fighters, because I heard people floating out the idea of Navarrete versus Tank Davis. I'm like, one, slow the hell down. First of all, where are you even going to place the catch weight? I'm not convinced that Gervonta Davis could still do 130, but they're only a weight class apart. So maybe 133 or something, but let's just be hypothetical right now, right? The style of fights. Look, if Navarrete fought Gervonta Davis and was able to take Davis's punch the way that he took Oscar Valdez's punch, that would be one of the most amazing things I will have ever seen in boxing. Seriously, you got a 122 guy, then campaigned at 126, won a belt there. Then at 130, had a couple fights, beat Oscar Valdez, then fights Gervonta Davis and is able to take take hard Gervonta Davis punches. I don't see it. Gervonta Davis is not Oscar Valdez and vice versa. And then Shakur Stevenson, Devin Haney. I'm just saying that prototype. I see. You have to, in order to beat Navarrete, you've got to do something to stop the output. You can't have this guy throwing 120 punches around and win the fight. You just can't. So Shakur Stevenson would have to be so good that he reduces the punch output. And that's normally what you get from somebody of the ilk of Shakur Stevenson. We saw it with Floyd Mayweather all the time. He would fight a high volume guy, and aside from Marcos Maidana and a couple of others, he usually is able to calculatedly reduce his opponent's punch output and then take over. And then from like rounds 5 through 12, it's all Floyd, right? Shakur Stevenson would have to have that type of an effect and an impact on Navarrete's punch output. Most would believe that he could do it, but hey, I would favor Shakur Stevenson, but I like to see it. I would like to see it, I mean, it's not like Shakur Stevenson's fight against Oscar Valdez was a total walk in the park. Yes, it was a pretty dominant win, but he got hit a lot less by Valdez than Navarrete did, but I mean, we're talking way different styles. I would like to see if Shakur Stevenson is able to have a Shakur Stevenson paced fight against Navarrete. Whoever is able to control the pace, you would think wins the rounds in that one. But yeah, there are styles that I could see giving Navarrete a problem. I don't think that his style would work against everybody. You've got one guy in Gervonta Davis who just might put your lights out. And then you've got Shakur Stevenson who might reduce your punch output. Let's see. Let me take a moment. I want to get to a lot of what you guys are saying. David Iser said, I watched Otard, the pit bull on Pro Box. He looked good against Roger Gutierrez. Oh, so Roger Gutierrez, the guy who lost against Hector Garcia, did he lose against Otard, the pit bull? If so, let me know, please. David Iser, thank you for bringing that one to me. Benny Bronx said that Andrade is not going to engage the way Plant did. He's going to use the whole ring. So you're saying that he's going to move better than Caleb Plant, which is possible. But okay, does he hit as hard as Caleb Plant? Maybe. I think the jury's out on that one. I'm not sure. Caleb Plant, I've seen Caleb Plant put people out, including Anthony Durrell with his left hook. I think Demetrius Andrade might be more of a two-fisted fighter than Caleb Plant. And yes, I mean, Demetrius Andrade did knock out Quigley pretty early. That was the rarity, though. That's the exception, not the rule when it comes to Andrade. But, again, when I think about Andrade's, the second half of his fight against Liam Williams was kind of able to get to Andrade in the later rounds and was able to connect. And in Liam Williams, you've got somebody who kind of crouches low and then throws his power punches from a lower crouch, right? Who's looking to march forward and throw his hard punches. In David Benavidez, you've got somebody who's at least as tall as Demetrius Andrade. I'd want to see what they look like eye to eye. Sometimes you see what the measured height is between fighters, and it's not until one you see them in their press conference and weigh-in face-offs. But even that could be a little bit deceiving depending on what shoes they're wearing and this and that. So sometimes it's not until you actually see the guys in the ring that you understand who the bigger fighter is. And I'm just wondering what the size dynamic between Andrade and David Benavidez is going to look like. Because, I've seen David Benavidez listed at 6'1". I've seen David Benavidez listed at about the same height as Caleb Plant. I've seen David Benavidez listed as like the same height or a shade shorter than Anthony Durrell. But once you saw the guys in the ring, you're like, that's a big dude. I don't know if David Benavidez is 6'2", 6'3", but if these other guys are 6'1", David Benavidez is not 6'1". You know what I mean? So, Demetrius Andrade does move around the ring. He's a very tricky fighter, no doubt about it. And look, I feel like Demetrius Andrade would do well in the early rounds against David Benavidez. There's just something about fighters like Benavidez, if they could take your activity and your punch, or not your activity, but your punch, and are able to keep on throwing as many punches per round as they want to, and throw it in David Benavidez isn't just like let's throw a million things at the wall and see what sticks. David Benavidez punches very accurately. He's got pretty fast hands, and he throws in intelligent combinations where you see that he's not just he's not just like a Jorge Arce, and that's no knock to Arce, but he's measured in the types of punches that he's throwing. Look, I love to see the fight. I'd have to give David Benavidez a slight, if I was gonna be the odds maker, I would say David Benavidez minus 150, 140, something like that. Demetrius Andrade plus 145, something like that. You know what I mean? I would have to make David Benavidez the favorite, just because I seriously feel like even if Andrade has early round success, that if he can't stop the avalanche, and he's now in his mid-30s fighting a 20-something-year-old, David Benavidez might, you know what fight it might remind me of when I think about this fight, now that I think about it? Jarrett Hurd versus Erislandy Lara. Erislandy Lara, craftier fighter, used the whole ring, moved around pretty well, but at a certain point, and he was winning rounds to where heading into the 11th and 12th round, it was anybody's guess who was winning that fight. But you saw the legs of Lara start to fade, where he started to move around less, and then you started to see Jarrett Hurd start to keep him in the pocket and then get him against the ropes. Develop some of those scenarios where the younger, bigger Jarrett Hurd started putting a beating on Erislandy Lara, dropped him in the final round, and that was largely the difference in that fight. That was Jarrett Hurd's best win. To me, that was like the beginning of the end for prime Erislandy Lara. I kind of have the same feeling when I think about Demetrius Andrade against David Benavidez, or David Benavidez against Demetrius Andrade, however they pitch it. But yeah, we'll definitely talk more, more about that fight if they in fact make that fight. Let's see. G-Man7 is in the house. Thank you for coming through. David Iser said, Otar beat Gutierrez. Roger is nothing special. He was a good performance nonetheless. Okay, yeah, I'm going to put Otar the Pitbull on my radar. Thanks again for calling that one out. Oh, MAW is in the house. Thank you. Thank you for coming through. Stan Tucker is in the house. That's my dad, y'all. Thank you for coming through. I was just on FaceTime with him a little bit before this chat. Let's see. You know what, thank you, MAW. Smash that like button. I often forget to say that. If you guys haven't liked the video, please do so. Thank you in advance. And thank you if you already did. Stan Tucker, thank you again, Dad, for coming through. We talk boxing all the time. We talked boxing probably a couple days ago, a couple days before that. And, we watched the Spence versus Crawford fight together. Me, my dad, my mom, my brother. We always FaceTime my cousin Benji. I miss my sister Lisa. Love you, Lisa. Ryan, if you guys are watching. Love you guys. But yeah, it's always a family affair when we talk boxing and watch boxing. And, that's how I got into boxing, is watching and talking boxing with them. David Eister said, style-wise and entertainment-wise, I think Navarrete is the best out of all those guys at 130. Joe Cordina, I agree. Joe Cordina, I would put a little asterisk, or I would pay a lot of attention to Joe Cordina, because of the way that he beat Rakhimov, more so even than the way that he beat Ogawa. I was super impressed by Joe Cordina in those last two. I saw somebody say something about Lee Wood. I want to get to that one really quickly. Let me just try to go in order a little bit, and then I'm definitely going to stumble upon the Lee Wood comment, because Lee Wood, he's going to be fighting Josh Warrington coming up. And by the way, Luis Alberto Lopez, one of the champions at 126, the guy who just knocked Michael Conlan out, a scary knockout too against Conlan, and the guy who beat Josh Warrington before that. And Josh Warrington should be getting another title fight. That's one of those situations where because you've got a name, and you're a UK fighter, and UK really support a lot of their fighters. In a way that, I mean, quite frankly, a lot of American fans, I mean, there are a lot of American fans. American fighters don't get that same groundswell of support from the American fans in a way where it makes business sense to put a lot of these like big fights together in the way that they're able to do it in the UK right now. And so Josh Warrington, for those reasons, is going to get another shot at the title against Lee Wood. And again, Luis Alberto Lopez, who now has that win over Warrington, knockout win over Michael Conlan, is going to be fighting Joet Gonzalez, somebody who's always game, just a tier down from the elite, I feel. Lost a close fight against Isaac Dogbe, lost via decision to Shakur Stevenson. I feel like he lost another pretty close fight. Let me know if you know what Joet Gonzalez's other loss was, but he's a guy who just notoriously starts late. That's his problem. He just, even when going into a fight, hey, if you're Joet Gonzalez, you don't want to start late, and then he comes out the next fight and starts late. Basically gives up like the first 3 to 4 rounds. He almost lost his last fight against a much lesser name for those same reasons. Let's see. David Eister said Hector Garcia is the worst champ at 130. Let's see. Because, okay, O'Shaquie Foster is the other champ. He's a WBC champ who just beat Ray Vargas when Ray Vargas, one of the 126-pound champs, went up to try to contend for a vacant belt against O'Shaquie Foster. O'Shaquie Foster boxed his ears off, and so he's the other champion in the division. So Hector Garcia, I was impressed by the way that he put a beating on Chris Colbert. I was impressed by the way that he fought Gervonta Davis. Let's keep it real. Hector Garcia had a better performance against Gervonta Davis than Ryan Garcia did. Than a lot of guys did against, Tank Davis. He fought very well. And even in his fight, against Roger Gutierrez, Hector Garcia looked pretty good there as well. So is he the worst champ at 130? There's Navarrete, Hector Garcia, O'Shaquie Foster, and somebody who we've already named. Garcia, O'Shaquie Foster, Navarrete. Yeah, Navarrete is the other one, if I didn't already name him. But I feel like there's one more champ that we're leaving out. But we probably named him earlier anyway. Hector Garcia, I don't know. I mean, he's one of those fighters who's pretty good at everything, but he's not like great at anything. If he was, you would rate him B minus, B, pretty much across the board. I feel like he's one of those fighters. Benny Bronx said, you think Navarrete is going to take the fight against Shakur Stevenson? Take the fight as in win the fight, or take the fight as in take the fight and fight the guy? G-Man7 said Navarrete is gonna fight Loma, go up to 135. You know, it sounds like people are talking about Navarrete versus Tank Davis, and it's interesting, right? Because there's really a new shine around Navarrete's name after that performance, right? Is he gonna go with a fight that is meaningful in his division, or is he gonna line up a big payday, a super fight that Bob Arum is willing to put together because the opportunity is there? It's going to be worth keeping an eye on. You said, Robert Garcia said that he's going to go up to 135 to fight Loma. Wow, that would be something else. All the way 130. Oh, I mean, it's just one division up now at this point. Robert Garcia. Okay, I'm going to keep an eye on that and see if that's true. And if it is true, I'm going to be like, yeah, G-Man7, he broke that one down. Upheaval 963. Yeah, yes, sir. Stan Tucker said, I think Benavidez beats Andrade, but if it goes the other way, great opportunity for both guys. Yeah, absolutely. Especially for Demetrius Andrade, who, the fights that matter, I truly think that the fights that he could have had, it wasn't his fault in most cases. In a couple of cases, it kind of was, but there were a lot of guys that he was really wanting to fight, and the other guys just didn't have any desire or weren't interested in fighting him. So you had Demetrius Andrade, the WBO champ, Jermall Charlo, the WBC champ, and like they couldn't get that one together. Canelo obviously, didn't want to fight Demetrius Andrade. Who else at 160 mattered at the time? Triple G didn't have any real desire in fighting Andrade. I almost feel like Andrade should have found a way to fight. The name is escaping me, but it's a Japanese fighter that Triple G fought to unify the titles. Who had beaten what is it? What was the guy's name? But yeah, I feel like he should have tried to find a way to get a second title in a division. And in retrospect, should he have stayed back and fought Janibek Alimhanala? Should Demetrius Andrade have fought him? Should he have fought Zach Parker at the time that he had was scheduled? They had scheduled. He had to pull out of that fight because of the shoulder injury, though. It just seems like nothing career-wise breaks Andrade's way. So I'm gonna take a quick sip. It's crazy. You get into it, and it's like 50 minutes in, 58 minutes in, you don't even realize you've been talking for an hour. It's wild. The fact that Andrade finally has an opponent that people are excited to see him fight, I think that just matters a ton. Win or lose, but if I had to bet, I don't think it's going to go well for him. David Eiser said, I can't stand Mauricio Lara after that crap he pulled. Missing weight big time against Lee Wood. I hope he never gets a shot at a big name again. Look, yeah, when you get burned in a bet, that always hurts. That does hurt. I'm still sore from Triple G or Canelo versus Triple G 1, resulting in a draw. I lost money on that one. I had Triple G winning that fight straight up. But yeah, Mauricio Lara, I wonder if we're going to see him at 126 again, or if he's going to campaign at 130, because he had missed it by 3 pounds or something. And Lee Wood, I remember this being a big thing. Lee Wood still took the fight because he was being advised by his people not to take the fight. It's like, dude, this guy just knocked you out in this rematch. I mean, there was so much pressure on Lee Wood to win that rematch, and for the guy to miss weight, and you know how dangerous of a puncher he is, you're still going to accept that fight in the rematch with now a bigger Mauricio Lara who's got this vicious knockout power. I've got nothing but respect for Lee Wood. David Eiser said, speaking of Lee Wood, he ducked the Uzbek dude who is his mandatory. Can't pronounce his name, but he's really good. Is he the guy? I just saw that there was a fight made, but it's probably not against the same opponent. Yeah, if you could find who Lee Wood's mandatory is, let me know who that guy is, or if anybody here knows who that mandatory for Lee Wood is. Lee Wood is going for a payday. He's in his mid-30s now. Like, he's kind of paid his dues, right? Against all the Jazza Dickens in the world. So now he's got an opportunity, now that he's beaten the boogeyman of the division for a while, Mauricio Lara. He beat Lara. So I'm kind of happy that Lee Wood is able to just pick up a big check. And I'm going to be pulling for Lee Wood against Josh Warrington, because I do want to see him fight another one or two, top 126 guys. And I mean, one of my favorite fights in recent memory is still that fight, basically the 2022 fight of the year between Lee Wood and Michael Conlan. Such a good fight. Such a good fight. Yeah, Upheaval 963 said Navarrete took Dog Bay's soul, and Dog Bay's got a lot of soul. That guy's got so much heart. For him to go the distance in that first fight against this, this nightmare of an opponent. I mean, how many fights have we seen Isaac Dog Bay in now, where in the second half of the fight you're like, oh my God, I often find myself feeling bad for how brutal and how grueling a Dog Bay fight is. Whether you're talking about his fights against Navarrete, obviously, his fight, basically everything since the Navarrete fight. Because remember, Isaac Dog Bay stopped Jesse Magdaleno. That was a big, big deal at the time. And then he lost to Navarrete in those two fights. He won that close fight against Adam Blue Nose Lopez. And even in that fight, there were moments where I'm like, damn, is Dog Bay about to get stopped? Because he's getting hit super hard. He looks like he's wilting. He's now starting to get beaten up against the ropes, that type of thing. And then in his fight against Joey Gonzalez, razor thin decision, but it was like a super grueling fight. Isaac Dogboe has no like easy outs, like, you know, in the past several fights. I don't envy his fight-by-fight schedule or his fight-by-fight outcomes, whether he's won or lost. And then obviously his fight against Robesi Ramirez, which he did lose. Benny Bronx said, "We saw what Shakur did to Valdez. I think Navarrete is going to get some of the same." And you know, yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with that. And I tend to agree with that. If I had to pick, like, okay, how's this fight going to play out? I think that Shakur Stevenson is going to start making, as Teddy Atlas would say, making Navarrete pay for the real estate, right, as he comes in. But you know what the one thing that's very interesting with Navarrete is? Like Antonio Margarito, Navarrete's got a long reach. He's got an Errol Spence length reach, 72-inch reach. He's going to have the reach advantage over Shakur Stevenson. Just something to think about. Navarrete is going to come in with the reach advantage in that one. David Eister said, yeah, Otar beat Gutierrez. Yeah, okay. Him and Navarrete would be a banger. Yeah, especially at 130, right? David Eister said, there's also a good prospect at 130 named Eduardo Sugar Nunez, nuclear bombs for punches. Let me copy paste that. I'm going to look, Sub Swolls, if you still in the house doing your thing, can you mark that name or just text it to me or something? Eduardo Sugar Nunez. I'm going to look him up. MAW said Navarrete was impressive versus Oscar. I thought Oscar might catch him between punches and had enough to possibly put him away. Yeah, that was my in my preview video. That was my prediction. Valdez via late stoppage. Yes, the avalanche is going to work, but it's only going to work for so long before you run into something big. It just didn't. He took everything Oscar Valdez had to give him. Jay Foreman said, if the fight gets made, I'll be happy for Andre. This is his big chance. Better late than never. I think Benavidez will be too much for him. Yeah, it's very, very possible. And you probably possible and probable. Benny Bronx said, well, it could also be Lara versus Canelo. Ooh, you know what? Andre doesn't move enough and avoid engagement enough and reduce the punch output in the fight to that degree that Lara did against Canelo. And it's, you know, a lot of people still think that Lara won that one against Canelo. I felt like it could have gone either way at the time of the fight, at least. Let's see. I'm going to get to some of what you guys are saying. MAW said, looks like Navarrete just took Liam Wilson a little too lightly. Full credit for Navarrete dominating Oscar. It could have also been that. It could have been that. It could have also just been him growing into the next division, right? Just naturally, because Navarrete is still in his 20s. I just didn't like that Navarrete started to develop a little more build. You started to see it in his last couple of fights at 126, where he wasn't looking as skinny as he used to, and his body looked a little bit wider, a little bit broader, where there was a little bit more around the belly area. And so at 130, I thought that he just looked even more like that. So I was thinking, damn, maybe 130 is really not optimal for this guy, but you can't argue with that result against Oscar Valdez. David Eister says, speaking of Erislandy Lara, why the hell did he not have that fight with Danny Garcia on Showtime a week after the Crawfords? Yeah, like did they fully announce it, or was it just one of those where you hear like you see Coppinger or Michael Benson and the different boxing newsbreakers like say that, you know, Erislandy Lara versus Danny Garcia for like, what was it, Lara's lesser belt at 160, which would be totally bogus, right? Like, if Danny Garcia wins that, you could argue that Danny Garcia is like a champion now at 160. Danny Garcia, a champion at 160. That's just wild. It's almost like when Cotto was a champ at 160, but at least Cotto beat he was probably injured, but Sergio Martinez, and Cotto also beat, what was the other middleweight belt holder's name? Daniel Geale. So, okay, those are a couple those are a couple good 160 wins. That's pretty legit, even if it did turn out that Sergio Martinez had that knee injury. But I never looked at Cotto as being a 160 guy. I mean, shoot, it took me a while for to even acknowledge him as a 154 guy. But he, especially with that early loss against Austin Trout. But yeah, Danny Garcia versus Erislandy Lara. But okay, whatever. It's better than them not fighting, I guess. Joey Gonzalez also lost to Navarrete, but Joey Gonzalez went the distance against Navarrete, and he got his eye jacked up. David Iser said, I really like Oshaki Foster. I think he's the most skilled at 130. From a sweet science perspective, yeah, him or, again, Joe Cordina, one or the other. But I would like to see a Foster versus Cordina. That would be the proverbial chess match, right? Oshaki Foster versus Joe Cordina. But hell, I mean, everything is so fragmented where you've got Oshaki Foster and Hector Garcia, which is why I think that would be a possible unification fight. Otherwise, you got the other guy on Matchroom and then the other guy on Top Rank. So let's see. Julius Armstrong said Navarrete is a top 5 pound for pound right now. First of all, thank you for coming through. Secondly, top 5 pound for pound. I mean, he's a three division champion. I can't put him in top 5 pound for pound. I think that he's knocking on the door of top 10. But here's the thing. There's such an old guard we know Spence is out, or at least way down. If you still have him in the top 10, okay. Many probably don't even have Spence in the top 10. So that leaves a vacancy, right? But I had Shakur Stevenson outside of the top 10. I had some really good fighters out, like the bottom of the top 10 for me. I forgot exactly what the order was, but Jermell Charlo was there. Dimitri Bivol was there. Devin Haney and Gervonta Davis were at the bottom of it. Can you put Navarrete above them at this point? Again, very impressive win against Oscar Valdez. And I can't do it yet. I would have him in somewhere 11 to 15. Give me one more win against a big name at 130, and then maybe crack the top 10. It's just too much of a logjam. Sometimes you'll have a logjam at the top of the top 10, but we've got a logjam at the top 10, especially if you're allowing heavyweights, right? Because Usyk, is already in there. You can't put Lomachenko in there right now because he lost that close disputed decision against Devin Haney. But you can't have Lomachenko in the top 10 right now. He would be on the outside. But if you're allowing heavyweights, you've got to have Tyson Fury in the top 10, right? If you're allowing him to be in there, he's in there. So let's see. David Iser said, I thought Lomachenko was going to take the rest of the year off to focus on Ukraine. I haven't heard that, but I mean, respect, and if he does in fact do that. Time's definitely ticking on the boxing career, given he's in his mid-30s. Julius Armstrong said, Usyk is 36. Can he still be elusive? Hey, I'm taking a close eye on that on that fight against Dubois. 36 is no spring chicken, and he relies so much on his athleticism, coordination, being able to pick the lock in a way that I'm going to get to a little bit before we close this out. I'm going to talk a little bit about Joshua's performance. He was having a jab battle, right, against Robert Helenius. He looked like he was not comfortable because he wasn't preparing for a taller fighter. He was preparing for the 6'4" Dillian White. Joshua's 6'6", Helenius is a little taller than that. So he looked like, when you saw him throw a couple right hands that missed earlier in the fight, he caught him cleanly with that one before the knockout, but he looked like he was kind of tepid coming in. So I like to, you hear the pick the lock phrase, right? Usyk is a master at picking the lock. How do I get inside against this bigger guy? You probe, you angle, you move your feet, you feint, then you get in and land your shots. AJ is just learning how to pick the lock, because he's used to being the fee, fi, fo, fum, the killer in there. And then you saw in the last few fights a lot more measured ever since that Andy Ruiz fight, really. But he looked like when he was throwing the right hand, he was out of range. He wasn't close enough to Helenius to land it until Helenius started getting tired. Then AJ was able to start dressing things up a little bit better to give him the opportunity to step in, close those last few inches, and then throw the right hand and land it. Can Usyk still pick the lock against Daniel Dubois, who's, if nothing else, a very physically gifted fighter who hits hard as hell, isn't slow, and wants to take your head off? I'd be curious to see how Daniel Dubois responds to getting hit cleanly against Usyk, because you know Usyk's going to be landing cleanly. Sometimes Daniel Dubois just acts weird when he gets hit. He, like, you saw him against Lorena, right? The cruiserweight who moved up. Dubois was getting hit, and he must have had, I think he had a knee injury or something in that fight, right? Because he fell 3 times, but he looked like he fell without getting hit in a way that would cause a fall. It was kind of weird. It's like, you're not hurt from that punch, are you? Like, because he didn't look like it. He just looked like he couldn't stand up for long enough without falling. It was kind of bizarre. Go rewatch Dubois versus Lorena. And then obviously we saw the Dubois versus Joe Joyce fight. And people forget, Daniel Dubois was the favorite against Joe Joyce. And then we got what we got, where he got his eye jabbed off, where he ended up suffering an injury to his eye, took a knee, didn't get back up. So is Usyk still athletic, elusive enough to make this big, strong guy miss and to be able to control the fight in the way that we've seen Usyk do basically for his whole career? Is Daniel Dubois as cautious as Anthony Joshua? I would have to say no. But again, we'll see how he responds to getting hit flush by Usyk, who, yes, is a relatively small heavyweight, but is 6'3" and probably, 220? Like, he's not a little guy. So he's packing a punch. Ask AJ if AJ liked getting hit by Usyk. I'm really curious, but depending on what the odds sit at right now, it wouldn't be the worst idea maybe to put a little money on Daniel Dubois, because it's the heavyweight division where things happen, and when things go south, they go south fast. I wouldn't be shocked if Daniel Dubois is able to pull off the upset, but you would, again, have to favor Alexander Usyk, and it would have to kind of assume that his abilities haven't just completely hit a cliff. But I'm very interested in that one. That fight is not this coming weekend, it's next weekend. So I look forward to, I'm probably going to record the preview, my fight preview and prediction in the next few days for that one. Let's see. Well, let me get to a few years, then I want to ask you guys about Joshua Wilder and what you guys think, just what your early thoughts are on that one. MAW said Andre passed some non-title challenges, but was also ducked by challenges who just viewed him as a high risk, low reward. Exactly. And that's the last thing that you want to be tagged as a fighter. High risk, low reward. We saw it with Regis Prograis, right? If you're a super talented and skilled fighter who's not a big name or a box office draw, it's not worth it to a lot of these guys. Sometimes even if you have a belt, it's still not worth it to these guys. And that's the camp that Demetrius Andre kind of found himself in. Benny Bronx said Andre should have at least had the Daniel Jacobs fight. Yeah, I agree. I would have probably favored Demetrius Andre up until around the time Daniel Jacobs fought Canelo, basically. Well, no, definitely. Well, no, I mean, up until the time. So meaning that I would have favored Daniel Jacobs over Andre before Daniel Jacobs fought Canelo. That's what I meant by that. Stan Tucker said Crawford had a hard time getting high profile fights. Yeah, exactly. But so is it worth biting the bullet financially in a fight so that you could bet on yourself, as they say, and then receive the spoils on the other end of a possible win? Is that worth it? It's kind of I would imagine you guys are, I think that it's a case by case scenario. In some cases it is worth it. In other cases it might not be. But Yeah, Crawford had to wait a long time for people to really care about him. I mean, Crawford fans always cared about him, and us that pay close attention to boxing really cared, for his abilities and fight over fight, even though it was frustrating to see how they had to creatively matchmake for him at Top Rank. But now all that's ancient history. Now he's probably going to take another 1 or 2 fights, hopefully make a lot of money in those couple of fights, and then right off into the sunset. David Eister was mad at Andre for swerving Janibek. But he did save face if he's really going to go through with the Benavidez fight. Yeah, I agree. And yet, I was when Janibek was the mandatory, I was like, ooh, is Andre going to take that fight? Like, I don't know. Now might be the time to go up to 168. But Andre could have won that fight. You would have to give him a near 50% chance, if not favor him greater than 50% chance over Alim Hanala, Janibek. But at the time, Janibek's name was such a boogeyman, and he was so unknown to where it was like, oh, is that worth it? But then, because the thing is, Andre thought that after he knocked out Jason Quigley in the fashion that he did, that you got the impression with his post-fight interview and stuff that finally he had the performance, the type of performance, not a decision win, but an early knockout over Jason Quigley. Not a huge name, but he had an impressive knockout win. Now that's going to draw a big name, out to fight him, and it just didn't. And so it's like, damn, now I got to fight Janibek. I just think Demetrius Andre said, to hell with that. Jay Foreman responding to MAW saying, yep, this is Andre's chance to prove himself. It's a difficult opponent, but if he wins, it'll make him somewhat a star. Yeah, keyword is somewhat, because Benavidez is still boxing famous. He's not a crossover. Very, very, very few are. MAW said not bad, and not fighting Parker or Janibek was a bad look for Andre. Yeah, it got kind of frustrating, especially when him versus Parker was canceled, right? And then Parker ended up losing to John Ryder, right? How did that work out? It was was it a 168 title eliminator between Parker and John Ryder, where Parker got injured in the fight, hurt his hand or something, withdrew in the early rounds. I mean, I hate to say it, but yeah, Parker is no Navarrete. Not to say, look, I'm not saying that they had the same hand injury, so who knows? Maybe Parker's hand injury was way worse than Navarrete's, but Parker basically said, nope, they said they stopped the fight and John Ryder won. But Andre could have been the one who had that opportunity, but he ended up fighting Damon Nicholson months later. So yeah, it wasn't ideal. But yeah, I agree. MAW, win, lose, or draw, Andre versus Benavidez is still a quality fight. Yeah, very quality fight. I'm paying to see that regardless. And PBC is the type to put that on pay-per-view. Not that it shouldn't be a pay-per-view, but if it was Top Rank, I don't think Top Rank would put that on pay-per-view. Top Rank only does pay-per-views when it's really a pay-per-view. I mean, they gave us Teofimo Lopez versus Vasily Lomachenko for free. Upheaval 963 said Andre better have something to keep Benavidez off of him. Otherwise, it's going to be a long, long night. I agree. Yeah, you better hit him and hurt him. Make him really feel and respect that, or else he's just going to walk you down. And again, he's a high-volume guy who throws fast, accurate punches. I mean, is Demetrius Andre going to have a noticeable hand speed advantage against Benavidez? I don't know that. I know Demetrius Andre's got pretty quick hands. He doesn't have lightning fast hands. And I don't know if he's going to have a distinct hand speed advantage over Benavidez. And if he doesn't, it's just going to make it all the tougher for Andre. David Eister, Atabek Kalmatov is Wood's mandatory. Shoot, I wouldn't take that mandatory either. But you know what? It's funny because the WBA and the WBC, they make exceptions, right? They let you take non-mandatory fights and you get to keep your belt. Other organizations like the IBF, sometimes they'll say like, fight our guy or give us the belt. So yeah, they granted Lee Wood an exception, obviously. And again, I'm happy for Wood that he gets to fight Josh Warrington and doesn't have to fight Atabek Kalmatov. Kalmatov is probably going to have to fight somebody else unless he still gets to wait his turn. And then after this Wood-Warrington fight, still be the mandatory. But more often than not, Wood will eventually vacate his title if he's able to get another money fight and not have to fight Kalmatov. Then Kalmatov might find himself in a situation where he could fight for a vacant title. Yeah, we're about to wrap this one up in a sec. I want to thank you guys for coming in once again. Turkey is in the house as well. Thank you, Turkey, for coming through. Isaac Dogbay is damaged goods. He's been damaged goods since that first Navarrete fight. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, but I'm surprised that Dogbay won as much as he did after the Dogbay fight. Let's see. Yeah, my bad. I know I'm way behind on the comments right now. MAW said people have wanted to see Canelo versus Andre, Canelo versus Benavidez. Now one will cancel and the other will get the Canelo shot. Yeah, I would like to see Canelo fight Benavidez after this fight against Canelo-Charlo. Which, by the way, I don't think is going to go well for Canelo-Charlo. I just don't see those fights where the guy goes 2 divisions up and it worked well for that fighter. G-Man7 said, I think Navarrete could beat Lomachenko. Bam Rodriguez versus Sonny Edwards is a good fight. Sonny's big mouth. Bam's going to get to him in the late rounds. Sonny's going to run. Yeah, Sonny's a sweet scientist, and Bam's sweet science style fighter as well. A lot more high volume than Sonny Edwards. You would have to favor Bam over Sonny Edwards. David Eiser said Teddy Atlas was praising Navarrete like crazy and saying Shakur is boring on his show today. You know, I like a lot of Teddy Atlas's commentary. Sometimes he definitely favors certain styles of fighter over others, but you would think that Teddy Atlas, of anybody, should know an effective style when he sees one. But I watch a lot of Teddy Atlas's his videos, and I'm gonna check that out. I want to see what he's got to say about Navarrete. But yeah, sometimes he just throws shade. I thought that he says unflattering things sometimes about Devin Haney as well. Says, you know, he's got like a cute style. You know, he calls him kind of like a cutie, and I think he picked Lomachenko to beat Devin Haney. He just hasn't given Devin Haney his proverbial flowers just yet. David Eister was laughing to let me see. No, he followed the Teddy Atlas comment up with the laugh emoji. MAW said, I agree, Turkey. He hasn't been the same since the Navarrete fights. Isaac Dogbay, right? But Dogbay did beat Joet Gonzalez, Adam Blue Nose Lopez, had a couple of impressive fights after those rough back-to-back fights. Benny Bronx said, Woog, like the late Big Pun said, reflexes of a cat and the speed of a mongoose. That's what Shakur brings. Yeah, good. Hey, I love that Big Pun. Capital Punishment album. You know, I never got into that Yeah Baby second album because they released that just after Big Pun died. I remember the single that they had where everybody was like holding their lighters in the air. It was an ode to Big Pun. But that first album, Capital Punishment, I gave you fair warning. Beware. Yeah, Big Pun, Capital Punishment. Good album. Sick lyricist. David Eister, speaking of Shakur, I think the WBC is going to order a fight between Shakur Stevenson and Frank Martin. Really? I haven't heard that. I heard that, I had heard that since Devin Haney's going to be going up to 140 to hopefully make a fight against Regis Prograis, that they would have that he's a champion in recess, right? I think we talked about this a little bit in the last video or the last chat. And then Shakur Stevenson versus Vasily Lomachenko could fight for the current version of the title, which Devin Haney would probably leave that champ in recess status that would then elevate the winner of Shakur Stevenson versus Lomachenko or Lomachenko versus Shakur Stevenson and elevate the winner of that from a lesser title holder to the full champ. That was at least my read or my interpretation of that. Let me know if you understand that otherwise. But yeah, I want to thank you guys once again for coming through. Let's see. I want to get to more of you guys' comments before we call it a day, because I see some pretty good stuff in here. Upheaval 963 said Teddy Atlas loses more and more credibility every time he opens his mouth nowadays. I still like a lot of his commentary. I feel like I've been hearing Teddy Atlas wheezing a lot more in his videos, like he's having like some difficulty, and he does it almost between phrases as he's talking, like he's doing it as he's saying like one thing, you know? But yeah, sometimes him and what's his name, Ken Rideout, sometimes they'll say some things that I'm like, really? Like I disagree with a lot of their takes, but it's interesting commentary. MAW, by the way, look at Teddy Atlas's comments on his disappointment over Francis Ngannou showing interest in having him, Teddy Atlas, training Ngannou for his upcoming fight with Fury, and then changing direction and going with Mike Tyson as his trainer, which I don't think is going to work well for Ngannou. But Ngannou's like a huge Mike Tyson fan. MAW also said he takes Teddy Atlas's opinions with a grain of salt. Damn, not a lot of love for Teddy Atlas in the house, huh? David Iser asks, how do you think Inoue would do against Navarrete? Damn. With 2 divisions up? Not well. So if he went up from 122 to 130 to fight Navarrete right now, he's a brilliant fighter. Like, Inoue's a remarkable fighter. But I don't think it would work. I don't think it would go well for him against Navarrete right now. But, you know, I didn't think he was going to dominate Stephen Fulton in the way that he did either. To be honest, look, I think that Marlon Tapales might, well, you can't put up a much worse of a fight than Stephen Fulton did against Inoue. I'm just saying that I think that Inoue versus Marlon Tapales is going to be and he's the holder of the other 2 titles in that division. I think it's going to be a surprisingly more competitive fight than many will expect going into it. But it often works out like that. Sometimes you think that the guy who's just going to be the total pushover ends up pushing back. Let's see. Upheaval 963 has Navarrete at around 12 through 15 pound for pound. Yeah, I think I would put him around there as well. MAW, I'm sure Teddy just says controversial stuff for views like Stephen A. Smith. I don't follow him too closely. David Iser said something I heard too was Erickson Lubin. I heard that one. Jesus Ramos versus Erickson Lubin. Jesus Ramos is the guy who just beat up was it Joey Spencer, kind of like the PBC prospect who was fighting way lesser fighters. Jesus Ramos also has a win over Brian Mendoza, the guy who knocked Sebastian Fundora out a few months ago. Jesus Ramos is kind of a bad boy. Not to be confused with the 147 pounder Abel Ramos, who just lost to Cody Crowley. Yeah, Erickson Lubin, for a while, I was sure that he was going to be a 154 pound belt holder at some point. But then when he ran into, first he ran into that right hand from Canelo-Charlo, put him out in the first round. One of the most exciting and shocking knockouts of Canelo-Charlo's career. But then he got the brakes beat off him in a very good fight against Sebastian Fundora. And, he got hurt badly against Jason Rosario as well. Erickson Lubin did. So I'm like really worried about Erickson Lubin's, just his career path at this point. I've seen him take a couple, and now he's still very young, but he's had some very, very tough fights, especially the way he got mangled against Sebastian Fundora. It's one thing to get knocked out, being unexpectedly knocked out cold or knocked out cleanly first round against Canelo-Charlo. It's another thing where you sustain a beating round over round, like he did against Sebastian Fundora and like Errol Spence just did against Terrence Crawford. But yeah, I want to thank you guys for coming through. Let's see. Karma Serene's in the house too. Howdy. Yeah, thank you for coming through. Karma Serene, follow her on Twitter. She's hilarious. And I just saw your new the video that you had put up last week. remind me on Twitter to comment on that because I was working, but I wanted to comment on the video. So remind me on Twitter if you can, and I'll drop the comment that I was planning to drop. But yeah, Carmen Serene, one of the funniest in boxing commentary and just social commentary as a whole on Twitter. Hilarious. Thank you for coming through. QT is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Yeah, you could catch up with it. We talked a lot of different stuff. We talked a little Gary Antoine Russell, Benavidez, Andre, Bam versus Sonny, little Richardson Hitchens versus Jose Zepeda at the top of the hour. Diego Pacheco versus Marcelo Caceres was just made. Let's see. Yeah, thank you guys once again. David Eister, Turkey, Karma Serene, QT, MAW, Upheaval 963, Jay Foreman, Khalidin Kabata is in the house. Yeah, thank you for coming through. Yeah, Navarrete needs to try King Taco, Long Beach Boulevard. Long Beach is in the house. Yes. Yeah, thank you again for coming through. Yeah, David Eister. I know my dad was in the house. Stan Tucker, Benny Bronx came through. Sup Swoles, as always. G-Man 7. Julius Armstrong. Yeah, until next time. By the way, so there are no big fights coming on this weekend. I think Gal Yafai is a matchroom fighter. Very small. I'm trying to think of the division he's in. He's a flyweight, right? I want to say flyweight. He's not a super flyweight, is he? But let me know what you think about Gal Yafai. He's fighting this coming weekend, but there's no fight bigger than that. Next weekend is when we get Alexander Usyk versus Daniel Dubois. I'm going to be doing a preview on that one. And also, I'm probably going to react to some of the action after this weekend, and we're going to do a live chat early next week as well. You know, depending on what news breaks, since there are no big fights coming on this weekend, I might do another live chat before the end of this week. But yeah, next week, Usyk versus Dubois, and also Big Baby, Jared Anderson is returning to the ring just a few weeks after his fight with Charles Martin. He's going to be fighting a lesser opponent next weekend as well. So that's not this coming weekend, but next weekend. But yeah, thanks again for coming through, everybody. Thanks again for the commentary. Check it out. Like, I often, it's easy for me to just kind of get to talking about a particular subject, and then I'll just kind of go on with that. But you guys always, I'm never disappointed in the thoughtful comments that you guys are making, the thoughtful questions that you guys are asking, and just the commentary. I could tell that everybody in here is a boxing head, and even those who might not be hardcore boxing heads are interested enough boxing fans that it's reflected in your comments and commentary. You know what I mean? And I really appreciate that. It makes me really excited to do these chats every week. So I know I didn't do one last week. My bad for that. But I can't wait to catch you guys on the next one. Let's see. Yeah, later. MAW. Hell yeah. See y'all. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.